introduce my dad. He told me a few things that I did wrong yesterday as we were flying. And he just reminded me that I was going to introduce him. So it's my pleasure to introduce the honoree of the day, Robert W. Bunke.
If you think I haven't had to tell him a few times. Well, Mayor Hollum, all the members of the Rushford City Council, and Charlotte, your dedicated airport commission, I'll never forget you. And all of you out of the aviation world that saw fit to come here today, what a tremendous honor for me to see all of you and meet all of you. My precious family members that took time to come and see this great dedication. Ladies and gentlemen, before I would start a speech today, I have to, right up front, give Mike and Barb Thurn a commendation and a big, big thank you for making this airfield look like it does and handling what we see here today. Mike's father, Royal Thurn, and I were flying together at Winona, not really together, but we were both flying out of Winona, and we got our multi-engine ratings actually in the same week. Can you believe that was back in March of 1967? If my math is right, I believe that's 50 years ago. And you know, I can still see that beautiful twin Comanche that Royal purchased just prior to getting his multi-engine rating. We were so proud of Royal and that beautiful airplane because there wasn't a whole heck of a lot of money around at that time. My good friends, how in the world do you express the honor that is bestowed upon me here today? I could go on and talk for hours on what it took to build this place, but I better stick to the script today. It's just, there's no way that an old pilot like myself could ever dream of having a field named after him. I used to fly into Milwaukee a lot because our law firm was down in Milwaukee, and I never said I was going to fly into Milwaukee. I was going to fly into Mitchell Field. Well, Mitchell Field was named after General Billy Mitchell, and any of you that have studied history in World War II, you know who General Mitchell was. Now you can fly into Robert W. Bunke Field. Isn't that something? And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not bragging about it at all. I don't claim to be a General Billy Mitchell, but I am really proud of this field here today. And I want to say something. What has been named here today is not just a few acres of land. No, it's the culmination of a lot of hard work, a lot of planning, a lot of organization, and ultimately a lot of control that finally evolved into the Rushford Municipal Airport and literally put Rushford, Minnesota on the world map of aviation, and I'm pretty proud of it. I think back, I could talk for an hour on all of the things that have happened at this field here and the development of it and afterwards, but I remember the first time that I filed an IFR flight plan out of here. I called the controller and gave him my flight plan, and he came back and kind of, you could almost see something on his face. I couldn't see him, but I could tell there was something. He says, "Where in the H is 55 Yankee?" And I very sternly came back, but jokingly, I said, "Sir, you have really stung my pride today." I said, "I want you from this day forward to burn into your memory that 55 Yankee is the Rushford Municipal Airport at Rushford, Minnesota." And I'm sure that he thought I was a real smart aleck. I'm sure some of you, and certainly some of you have come from so far away, would not know, why did this airport wind up on this location? I happen to be the guy that can tell you how it happened. I would flying to Des Moines, Iowa a lot. I happened to be on a board of directors of the Telephone Association in Iowa, and my route back would always be Des Moines, Mason City, direct Nodine, and on into La Crosse, because I was keeping my airplane at La Crosse at that time. And as I came over, and if you draw a line from Mason City to Nodine, you pretty well come over this area. And of course, I knew the area very well from hunting of this country and growing up around here. But I looked down at this airport, at this area, and I said, my gosh, I think something would work here. If you look about 2/3 of the way down, or probably at the end of the airplanes that are parked there, was a farmstead, the old Anderson farmstead. And it was kind of old and run down a wee bit. And I said, if we could acquire that homestead, and there was quite a large hump of dirt there, we can push most of that to the southeast, and we'd probably wind up with a pretty good runway. Well, the rest is history. It all worked out. And not only that, but it worked out so well because it was into the prevailing winds. Well, sometimes I wish it was a little bit more toward the northwest because I've landed here with some pretty wicked west winds, but it worked out pretty good. I'm sure you wondered, when in the world did I get interested in flying? Well, it goes back to the early 1930s. We were living out by Brattsburg at that time, and I would watch my brother Earl make little model airplanes, a lot of times just little stick models out of balsa. And the big deal was then he and I would head out to the hay barn and test fly these things and get them all fixed just right so they would fly. It was a wonderful time, and I began to getting interested in it. And my oldest brother, Paul, and our neighbor, Orly Oyen, and I believe Steve is here with us today, Steve and Judy, they became buddies, and Orly owned an old Peton pole, which, by the way, for any of you that don't know it, was built over here at Cherry Grove, about 40 miles west of here. And I don't think either one of them had formal training at the time. I have to tell one quick little story where Orly's brother was very good at telling stories anyway. And he said Orly was kind of taxiing this thing around in the pasture one day, and he said it felt so kind of good. He pulled back on the stick and he hopped up over the fence, and now he was stuck. he landed it right way, but now they had to cut the fence to get the airplane back to the pasture. But anyway, Paul, my brother Paul, and he flew that thing up to Minneapolis, up what is now Old Chamberlain, and that was 1934. And when they got up there, the airplane wasn't registered or anything, and boy, they shagged them out, clear out onto the end of the field out in the grass someplace. They didn't even want to know they were there with that airplane, because I don't think either one of them really had a pilot's license at that time. But that was what flying was like. We'd go over to Orly's farm on Sunday afternoons. The neighbors would all gather around out in the pasture there, and Orly would fly this Peton pole. I'll never forget one time he came over real low, and he hollered out the airplane. He says, "Get those dang cattle out of the way so I can land this airplane." Well, anyway, that was the early flying that I got interested in. And on July 1st of 1945, I soloed, and of course would fly from then on, not quite till now, but for the next 50-some years. I tell you this little story or history just to let you know how much this airport means to me. When we dedicated this airport in 1977, I was sure that that would be the climax of my interest in this whole project. Little did I realize that today would be the greatest day for me, and I just have to thank you for that. In remembrance of that day, I was telling Mike Thurn, I said, in remembrance of that day, I think you had over 80 aircraft that come in here today, and I hated to, well, I guess I told Barb I hated to do this, but I said, we beat you on the dedication day. 90? Yeah, well, we still beat you on the dedication day. We had 123 because we actually registered every airplane that came in that day, and that didn't count the airplanes that we had based here, so we always bragged about the fact that we had 125 airplanes at Rushford Municipal that day. I talk about that dedication day for only one reason, and that is that there were so many people that helped make this thing. Sure, I did spearhead some of there was a reason why I did and everything, but there were so many people that helped us. And even though that time has passed, I could never forget them. And I don't think a lot of you would ever forget them. And people like Mayor Art Miller, and I'm glad that Jim mentioned it before. He worked so well with me. Once I had the okay from St. Paul, from Department of Aeronautics, Art really went to work with his council and we got the job done. Larry McCabe, who was Commissioner of Aeronautics at that time for the state of Minnesota. What a tremendous guy to work with. I will never forget one time when I had flown back and forth to St. Paul several times, met with him, and well, I wasn't sure we were getting any place. But finally he said, Bunke, he said, if you guys put your money where your mouth is, he said, we might get this thing done. I said, Larry, you've got it. And I headed for home and talked to Art Miller, our mayor, and we were underway. The voice of aviation was here at that dedication. It was Sherm Bowen. What a tremendous guy, an old Marine. And of course, that meant a lot to me because I'm an old Marine. But he was the voice of aviation on TV and on WCC radio in Minnesota for so many years. Congressman Al Quee was here and keynoted our dedication and would become our governor just shortly thereafter. And Jim mentioned it, but I'm going to mention it again. We had that great air show when Captain Ed Erickson flew that pit special about as well as a pit special can be flown. And Kathy, it's so good to see you again. And his daughter, Kathy, who is a Delta Airlines pilot now. And who could ever forget that beautiful flight of the sailplane with John Odegaard's flying? If I live to be 100, I will still remember the sound of Jonathan Livingston Seagull music. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but it's a beautiful, beautiful tune and a beautiful and a wonderful story about getting your silver wings. Well, there was a lot of, I think there was like 150 or 160 people here that day, and all those airplanes, and there was not one sound on this airport when John was flying that sailplane up over here, almost in concert with the Jonathan Livingston music. It was just absolutely beautiful, and I will never, never forget John Odegaard. It's been my dream that more young people in Rushford would become interested in flying, and I know maybe it'll happen in the future, and I know that it's hard to find the money to learn how to fly. But I'm going to say something, and I really mean this. If you really want to fly, you probably will find the money to do so, because flying requires something more than money. It requires a deep, deep desire to learn to fly. I think every pilot here would agree with that. It isn't something that you just happen to do. You have to have a deep desire to do it. And that was what I had. And if I wouldn't have had, I probably would have never learned to fly either, and I certainly wouldn't be here today. I can tell you a little bit about that regarding money and the desire to fly. It was 1945. The war was on. I was 1A in the selective service, and my oldest brother was a flight instructor over at Winona. And he had a mail contract, hauling mail from the post office to the depot, to the train, and from the train back to the post office. He knew how much I wanted to fly, and knew that I didn't have a dime in my pocket. He came out to the farm. I was 17 at that time. I would be 18 on May 3rd of that year, but it was April of 1945. And he said, Rob, if you could come to Winona after doing chores on Saturday night and haul mail that night and all Sunday night and meet the last train in the morning at 4:30 to Burlington across the Mississippi, he said, I can pay you $7.20 for the weekend. Now that sounds crazy, but flying at that time, $7 an hour for solo flight and $7.20 or $9 rather for dual. My brother Paul would have to carry me that $1.80, but I did get at least 1 hour a week, and that was in April, and on July 1st, 8 hours and 20 minutes later, I soloed. So I think you would have to agree that I had a desire to fly. I'm going to bring this little talk to a close by accepting this honor. There's a great saying, and I really believe this. When somebody offers you a gift, don't argue about it. Accept that gift. Accept it graciously. It's a wonderful saying, I think. I would like to change that word gift to honor. Today, I accept this honor most graciously, but really with very, very deep humility. And now let me close by reciting to you a little poem that I wrote, and it'll kind of tell you a little bit about my love of flying. If you look down, it was right after we finished the blacktop on the runway out here and had it all painted with the white stripes and everything. And I think most of you pilots will agree with me. When you look down the runway, you see that white strip. And we kind of like to stick to that center line because it's the safest place to be, both takeoff and landing. And I think some of you pilots will go with me because this was on my mind, and I want to take you just on a little bit of a trip. I entitled it, The Joy of Flight. As I roll to the start of the runway, I look eagerly to the sky, for the tower has cleared me for takeoff, and once again, I'm committed to fly. As the nose of the airplane lines up with that solid white line on the black, there's a feeling of joy as the engine roars, and there is no turning back. With throttle full forward, it isn't long before the spinning prop becomes so strong, and the roll that started slow at first is racing to free me from the earth. And there he goes. My heart pounds a little, but I can feel that moment of truth is near, when a slight backward force is all that it takes to lift me free and clear. The gear comes up to smooth the climb, and the power is reset too, and the earth starts to fade as I climb to the sky en route to my rendezvous. With altitude reached, I level off, for this is the place in the sky that's assigned to me for a little while, where no one else can fly. With cruise power set and course locked in, the engine no longer roars, but rather it hums a beautiful song that peacefully carries me on. The checkpoints pass so rapidly by, almost like life itself, and that races on even though I try to just slow it down and let me live and let me fly. And a lot of earth has passed below when the radio breaks the peace and I'm asked to descend from my space in the sky. And so I straighten up and prepare to comply. From now until the airplane stopped, I must be wide awake, though does it done 1,000 times before, there's room for no mistake. I see the field, and once again the joy of flight must end. The tower clears me next to land, and so I answer quickly to their command. On final approach, with all things set, I feel confident and safe, as if the mighty arms of God have held us in his embrace. The wheels touch down, and I roll along the long white stripe and the black. I know for today that the flight is done, but it's also good to be back. I park the airplane and loosen the straps that have held me secure for so long. I look up to God and his home in the sky, and I whisper, "Thank you, Lord, for letting me fly." Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this honor, and thank you for letting me fly.
Well, thank you, everyone.